Not the loud kind of rain that arrives in waves and makes you run for shelter, but the soft, steady kind that fills the air like a hum. The clouds had settled low over the hills, turning the sky a muted gray that seemed to hold everything in a gentle pause. I had been driving for hours. The roads were quiet, the town small, and the rain had followed me like a familiar voice, whispering on the windshield, tapping out rhythms I didn't mind hearing again and again. I wasn't in a hurry. Somewhere ahead, not far now, was the house, not mine, but one I'd been to before, a place that didn't belong to anyone, not really. A house that simply existed, waiting, quiet, warm. The road narrowed as I climbed the last hill. Trees lined both sides, branches dripping with the weight of the day's rain. Every leaf seemed darker, richer, alive in a way only rain can make them. At the top of the hill, I saw it. The house stood alone. A low structure with wide windows and an old brick chimney. Its roof was dark with wetness. Its porch light glowed through the mist. There were no other houses nearby, no street lights, only the sound of tires rolling over gravel and the ever-present hush of falling rain. I parked under the trees, shouldered my bag, and made my way to the door. The air smelled of wet pine and stone, the kind of scent that grounds you, that tells you you're safe now. You've arrived. The door was unlocked. It always was. Inside, the house smelled like books and wood, and something faintly sweet, like tea that had once been brewed, and left its memory in the walls. I set my bag down in the front room, took off my coat, still damp at the sleeves, and hung it near the old radiator. The house was warm, not just from heat, but from presence. A lamp glowed in the corner. The shade tilted slightly, casting long amber shadows across the rug. There was a window seat, wide and soft, lined with cushions, facing the large window at the front of the house, and beyond the glass, the rain, still falling, still steady, tracing long, gentle paths down the pane. I made tea. There was a jar on the shelf labeled "for slowing down." I smiled at that. The kettle hissed softly. The scent of chamomile and lavender rose as the steam curled upward. I poured, wrapped my hands around the mug, and walked to the window seat. Saturday exhaled. The rain tapped gently on the glass. No thunder. No wind, only rhythm, only peace. Outside, the trees blurred into soft outlines, their shapes shifting in the rain's shimmer. Inside, the room held its breath with me. The cushions beneath me sank just slightly. The lamp hummed faintly. The tea warmed my fingers. And I knew, without doubt, that this was what rest could feel like, when nothing asked you to be anywhere else. The tea cooled slowly in my hands. I didn't rush to drink it. It was enough just to hold something warm, to feel the cup's shape between my palms, to watch the steam curl upward and vanish into the room. Outside the window, the rain continued, Not harder, not softer, just steady, like breath. It traced the same paths down the glass again and again, never impatient, never tiring. Like the world was content to repeat itself forever, as long as I was here to watch. I let my head rest against the window frame. The glass was cool, but not cold. A grounding kind of sensation, the kind that reminded me I was real and still. The cushions beneath me adjusted with my weight. One of them smelled faintly of old books and something floral, like someone had once sat here with a garden in their hands. In the corner of the room, a clock ticked, but it didn't count time. It kept it, like a memory held carefully on a shelf. There was no urgency in its rhythm, no insistence, just presence. Tick, pause, tick. The sound folded into the hush of rain until I couldn't tell which came from inside and which came from the world beyond the window. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, just to listen better. With my breath, with my chest, with the space behind my ribs. That held more than just lungs. I listened with everything, and what I heard was this: nothing is wrong. Nothing is needed. This moment is complete. The tea had cooled enough to sip. I brought it to my lips. The flavor was soft and familiar. A memory in warm liquid. Lavender. Chamomile. Something deeper, too. Maybe lemon balm. Maybe time itself. The house made no demands, no screens, no doors to knock, no voices calling from other rooms. Just the faint creak of old wood beneath the walls, the murmur of water through the pipes, the tap of rain, the slow, sure rhythm of stillness. I curled my legs beneath me on the seat. The blanket at the edge of the cushions was thick and loosely woven. I pulled it across my lap. It had weight, but not heaviness. Warmth, but not heat. A blanket that seemed to understand how to hold someone without tightening. I breathed again, the kind of breath that has nothing to prove. No reason to rush in or out, only to exist. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't reach for thought, didn't search for purpose, just listened to rain on the window. It didn't change, it didn't stop. But the longer I listened, the more I felt like I could hear something beneath it, a kind of quiet, a softness too still to be noticed at first. As if the rain carried more than water, as if it remembered something I had forgotten how to ask for, and it was offering it back, drop by drop. The mug rested on the windowsill now, still warm, but forgotten. Not because I didn't want it, but because I no longer needed anything in my hands to feel comfort. The rain had taken its place, the soft blanket across my lap, the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air, and the window. The thin pane of glass that separated me from the world, but never truly kept it out. It let the sound through, let the rhythm enter, let the forest speak in whispers of water and leaf. There was no light beyond the mist, just the silver of cloud-wrapped sky. and the soft shadows of distant branches swaying with memory. Everything moved slowly, like the world had taken a breath and stretched it across hours. Inside, the house had grown quieter still. No hum of machines, no distant traffic, no buzz of devices waiting for attention. Only the occasional creak of old floorboards, settling under their own weight, as if the house itself was relaxing. With me, I shifted only slightly, leaned my shoulder deeper into the cushions, tilted my head so that my temple rested gently against the window frame. It was cool, but welcome, like the touch of rain through glass, like the feeling of a memory brushing past your skin, without needing to speak. Somewhere in another room, a floorboard sighed, not loudly, just enough to remind me I wasn't alone, not in the way people often think of company, but in the deeper way, the way a space holds you, knows you, settles with you without asking questions. I closed my eyes again, this time longer, this time softer, and I didn't fall asleep. Not yet. I just drifted into a layer beneath the surface where sound became sensation and time lost its shape. The rain on the window began to blur, not because it changed, because I did. Because I was no longer listening with ears alone. I was listening with breath, with skin, with the quiet space behind my eyes, where dreams wait patiently for permission. I thought about nothing, and in that nothing, I felt everything. The warmth in the room, the texture of the blanket, the slow, even rhythm of my own breath, the softness of the chair beneath me, the steady fall of rain, like a clock that never ticks, but always keeps time. There were no stories here, no beginnings or endings. Just now, just this, a house that holds you, a night that stretches wide, a rain that never hurries, and I, still as the glass, soft as the cushion, quiet as the tea left behind. Let go of the last edge of needing anything else, because everything I needed was already here. At some point, I stopped hearing the rain as separate. It was no longer tapping, no longer falling. It was simply present dash. A layer of the world that had always been like gravity, like breath. It moved through the glass, through the walls, through me. And I let it. The room around me had faded into softness. No sharp corners, no distinct edges, only warmth and curve, and the occasional shift of light. From the lamp behind me, casting slow-moving shadows across the floor. I didn't look at them. I felt them, like memory in motion, like time deciding not to move forward unless I asked it to. I uncurled slightly, stretching my legs under the blanket. The fabric slid like water, heavy in just the right way, settling over me as though it had been waiting for this exact shape. The window remained, but I had stopped watching it. I no longer needed the visual of rain to know it was there. I could feel it in my breath, in the air between my fingers, in the hush that wrapped itself around my heartbeat. Somewhere deeper in the house, something shifted. A board under the kitchen floor, a sigh from the radiator, a creak from the beams above. But none of it broke the silence. It only made it deeper. The way the forest deepens when you realize you're not alone in it, but never in danger. I rested my hand on the cushion beside me. The fabric was textured, woven. Something handmade and well-loved. It held the warmth of the room, the softness of hours spent in stillness. Even touch had slowed. Nothing rushed anymore. Not thought, not sound, not breath. I took another sip of tea. It had cooled, but it didn't matter. The flavor lingered, faint and herbal, like drinking memory, like sipping quiet. The cushion beneath me shifted just slightly, as though the house was adjusting to hold me better. Not because I needed it, but because it could. The kind of care that expects nothing, that gives freely, that holds you, without reminding you that you're being held. I leaned back again, this time with no intention of rising soon. Let my head settle into the curve of the frame. Let my shoulders release what they didn't know they were carrying. And as the rain breathed for me, as the room wrapped its silence around me like a shawl, I felt something loosen inside. Not pain, not fear. It slipped away, quiet as the moment between raindrops. And I smiled. Software small, not for anyone to see. Just because this was enough. Because I had remembered something I didn't know I had forgotten. What it feels like to be held by a moment that asks nothing of you, but to stay. The world had gone hushed. Not just the room, not just the rain, but something deeper. As if everything that once needed to be loud had agreed, just for now, to let silence take the lead. And so I followed, not with steps, not with thought, just with stillness. My body had grown heavier in the best possible way, not weighed down, but grounded. Held. Every part of me had settled, as if each breath I took tucked me further beneath the layers of calm. This house so willingly offered. I leaned fully into the cushions now, the blanket drawn up to my chest, the cooled mug resting empty on the windowsill, the lamp behind me casting the gentlest glow. No longer light, just presence. Outside, the rain moved on, still falling, still slow, but with a rhythm that had grown so familiar, I could no longer tell where it ended and I began. The droplets hit the glass, like the ticking of a distant clock that no longer kept time, but memory. I let my eyes close again, this time longer, this time easier. The darkness behind them wasn't empty. It was full of soft color, shifting shadows, a warmth that had no source, but felt earned. I didn't think of tomorrow, didn't reach for yesterday. Even the word today felt too heavy to carry. There was only now, and even that was beginning to fade into something quieter. The house breathed with me. The old radiator exhaled with a subtle sigh. Wood settled beneath the floorboards. Far above on the roof, the rain softened as it landed. No longer a pattern, but a feeling. Somewhere in the walls, I imagined the heat moving through old pipes. The way water might flow slowly, without destination, without resistance. And I smiled at that. At the idea of warmth, simply moving because it could. I thought of the shelves I hadn't looked through, the books I hadn't touched, the rooms I hadn't entered yet. And none of it felt like absence. It felt like grace, like the house was saying, you don't need to do everything to be welcome here. You can just be. You already are. I pulled the blanket a little higher, felt its weight across my collarbone, let my hand rest gently over my chest, feeling the slow, even beat of a heart that had forgotten how to hurry. The rain whispered on, not asking to be heard, only to be known. And I knew it. The house had settled into silence, not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels complete. The kind that wraps itself around you, like an old sweater, a well-worn quilt, a memory too soft to speak aloud. I hadn't moved in a while. My body had become an outline of warmth beneath the blanket. My breath no longer felt like an action. It just happened. Like the rain, like the quiet shift of light across the window. Everything moved without effort now. Even time had loosened its grip. I didn't know how long I'd been sitting here, but I knew it didn't matter. This moment, this stillness, wasn't part of any schedule. It didn't need to lead anywhere, didn't ask for conclusion. It was enough just to be inside it, to breathe it in, to rest against it, to belong to it. The window beside me had fogged slightly, just along the edges, where breath had met glass, where warmth had leaned into coolness. Outside, the world remained blurred, not by speed, but by softness. Every tree, every shadow, every shape was smoothed by the mist, as if the forest had drawn the curtains, deciding to rest too. I could hear the roof releasing droplets now, the kind that gather for hours, then fall one at a time, onto the earth below, each one a punctuation mark, a pause, a quiet exhale. I thought briefly of the room down the hall, the one with the bed, the lamp, the thick blankets that held the memory of winter nights and slow mornings. It waited there, unrushed, unconcerned. Like the rest of the house, it needed nothing from me. It simply existed, ready when I was. But I didn't stand, not yet. My body was too content, too aligned with the stillness around it. I let the moment stretch, let it unfold, like the pages of a book read only with the breath. The tea was cold now, but I didn't mind. The taste still lingered. Earthy, faintly floral. Grounding, a kind of echo in my mouth. Like a word you don't need to speak, but remember how it feels. The shadows in the room had shifted again. Not darker, just lower, softer. They crept slowly across the rug, gathering in corners like cats curling into themselves. And still, the lamp glowed. Still, the rain fell. Still, the house breathed. My heartbeat matched it all. Slow, steady, present. Like I'd finally remembered the rhythm I was made from. Like everything else had just been noise. And when I let my eyes close again, there was no thought of opening them. Just the hush, the warmth, the quiet knowledge that I had found at last a moment that asked for nothing. But stillness. It was hard to say how long I'd been resting there. Minutes? Hours? The world had slipped into something slower. Something round and soft, without edges, without points to measure against. Like drifting through warm water, with no need to reach the shore. The blanket across me had become part of the cushion. Part of me. Not as a weight, but as a knowing. It knew how to hold, where to settle, how to remain without asking for attention. I hadn't moved, but I didn't feel still. I felt placed, like a puzzle piece returned to its place. Not with precision, but with ease. Outside the window, the rain had shifted again. It was lighter now, more intermittent. Drops arrived one at a time, as if the sky was whispering farewells, but didn't want to leave too soon. The forest beyond the glass remained veiled, but there were signs of light behind the clouds. Not sunlight, just a change in tone, a paler gray, a hint of openness. Even the trees, once silhouettes, were now more suggestion than shadow. And yet, the hush hadn't lifted. It was still there. Holding the house. Holding me. The cushion beneath my shoulder creaked faintly. Not a protest. A sigh. As if the house itself was shifting into deeper rest. And the air had taken on that evening coolness. That settles into the corners. Just before true night arrives. I thought, briefly, of sleep. Of the bed waiting in the next room. Of sheets folded back. Of pillows heavy with stillness. But the thought didn't rise far. Didn't bloom. It simply floated through, then faded. Because I didn't need sleep to rest. I was already inside something deeper than dreams. I traced my fingers along the edge of the cushion, the texture of the fabric, coarse, soft, familiar, like the hem of a favorite coat, like the spine of an old book. Tactile memory, the kind that exists, even when the mind is quiet. The lamp behind me flickered once, just once, not in warning, not in error, just enough to remind me that even light grows tired sometimes. And still it glowed. Still it held space. I let my breath deepen, let my shoulders fall, let my thoughts unspool into loose threads that didn't need to be gathered. And the house, still as ever, remained my shelter, not by locking out the world, but by inviting in the stillness. I had forgotten how to carry, and in that moment, half inside a dream, half inside the rain, I realized something. I didn't need to fall asleep, because I was already resting. In the deepest part of being awake, I hadn't noticed when my eyes closed for the last time, not because I was tired, but because the space between open and closed no longer mattered. I still heard the rain, or maybe just remembered the sound of it. Either way, it was with me. Not as something outside the window, but as something folded into the slow rhythm of my breath. The house had grown impossibly quiet. So quiet, it was as if sound had chosen to rest too. The kind of quiet that comes when every living thing has decided to wait for morning. But there was no urgency in that wait. Only patience, only presence. I didn't know if I'd moved. I didn't need to know. My body had settled into a shape of stillness that required no correction. Every muscle had released. Every thought had faded. I existed like smoke after a candle is blown out. Not gone, just soft, lingering, calm. The window was still there, but I no longer pictured it. The rain, too, still fell in memory. I no longer saw drops, no longer heard their dance, but I knew they were there. The way you know someone's hand, even after they've let go. The blanket had warmed to my shape. The cushions held me like a familiar voice. The light behind my eyes had dimmed, until there was only a gentle glow, not from a source, but from the absence of effort. And in that space, that soft, soundless room inside me, a thought rose. Not with words, not with urgency, just presence. A knowing that didn't need to be spoken aloud. This is what it feels like to belong to the moment. I drifted. Not forward, not back, just downward. Like mist sinking into earth, like dreams returning to where they began. I didn't search for dreams, didn't chase images, but they came, quietly. Flickers of light, impressions, places without names, not stories, just feeling. Somewhere, the house breathed again. A distant creak, a shift in the wood, a whisper in the floorboards. But I was not startled, not disturbed. It was just the sound of old things resting, in the company of someone who finally understood how to be still. The room around me was no longer something I occupied. It was something I had become. The hush, the warmth, the softness of lamplight fading into shadow. It all lived inside me now. It all moved in the same rhythm. And so I remained, not asleep, not awake, just somewhere in between. Somewhere safe, somewhere whole, where nothing needed fixing, and nothing asked to be named. By now, I had stopped trying to name the feeling. It was no longer rest, no longer stillness, no longer quiet. It was simply everything. Everything that remained when all the noise had melted away. No thoughts, no difference between inside and out. Only softness, only breath, only being. I felt no weight, no pressure, no division between my body and the blanket, between my breath and the rain, between the room and the world. Everything blurred into one long, slow exhale. Somewhere, far off, the house creaked again. A gentle sound, not a shift, but a memory surfacing. And even that was soft. Everything here was soft. The window may still have held rain on its surface, but I no longer needed the image. I knew the rhythm of it. I had become it. The gentle fall, the quiet tap, the space between drops, where the world waited and listened. I no longer knew whether my eyes were open. I no longer asked. There was nothing to see, nothing to turn toward, because everything I had ever sought was already here, and always had been. My hands rested somewhere near my heart, or maybe at my side, maybe not at all. Their position didn't matter. What mattered was that they didn't need to do anything. Not hold, not reach, not fix. They were allowed to simply rest. The house made space for that. It didn't demand presence. It didn't require awareness. It offered only permission. You don't have to be anything right now. You can just exist. Even the rain, so steady, so loyal, had begun to fade from form. It no longer arrived as sound, but as pulse, as rhythm that came from somewhere older than language. A beat I had once moved to, without knowing, now remembered. Without effort, I floated, inside the chair, inside the blanket, inside the moment. Not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as part of it. Part of the hush, part of the glow, part of the slow unraveling of time. There was nothing left to do, nothing left to want. Even thought had unspooled itself into a thin mist, vanishing at the edges of stillness. And in that place, I stayed. Not because I had to, but because I could. Because I was allowed to. Because at last, the world had made room for me to be only this. Time had stopped asking to be counted. It no longer crept, or passed, or paused. It simply was. A presence, a softness, a slow, open sky that neither darkened nor brightened. Only breathed, and I breathed with it. No longer aware of the pattern, no longer needing the rhythm, only aware that breath was still happening, and that was enough. I no longer knew where I was in the room, whether I leaned or lay, whether I sat or curled. The shape of my body had dissolved into the quiet. The blanket no longer covered me. It had become atmosphere, part of the warmth that wrapped the moment. The rain, now so faint, might have been a dream, a memory of a sound once heard through glass, through night, through the steady beat of waiting. But even as a memory, it felt real, lived in, worn like soft fabric, felt like quiet skin. There was no narrative anymore, No beginning, no progression, no voice leading me forward, only unfolding, like mist from warm earth, like silence from a long breath. Somewhere in the house, the last light must have dimmed. Or perhaps it remained, but I no longer saw it, because sight had stopped being necessary. Not lost, just exchanged for something deeper, a kind of knowing that lived beneath vision, beneath awareness, a knowing without shape, without form. The house was no longer a place, it was a feeling, a collection of warmth and wood, blankets and old tea, books left open and windows half fogged. It had no walls in this state, no rooms, only presence, and I was not inside it. I was part of it, like dust in a beam of light, like warmth in steam. No thought had visited me for some time, even the ones that arrived gently. Should I move? Am I asleep? Is this now? Had all drifted away, like leaves floating downstream, unhurried, unnoticed, gone. And I welcomed the emptiness, not as void, but as fullness. A silence that didn't lack anything, but included everything. All the stillness I had never made room for. All the quiet I had once drowned in noise. All the peace I had once called absence. Here now, entire, alive, no dreams, no names, no need. Only the space between breaths and the gentle, never-ending hush of rain that might still be falling somewhere. At some point, I noticed the world again, not sharply, not suddenly, but like surfacing through warm water, slow, smooth, without urgency. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't shift. I simply became aware that I was still here, that the house still held me, that the rain, though quieter now, had never truly stopped. The stillness had changed, not disappeared, just taken a new shape. Not silence, but presence. Not emptiness, but completion. I let the awareness grow gradually. The weight of the blanket, the softness of the cushion, the faint scent of rain-soaked wood, lingering in the air. My breath had remained deep, even, unforced. It didn't need my attention. It simply continued, like a tide that had nothing to prove. Beyond the window, a new kind of light waited. Not dawn, not brightness, just a slow silver, spreading across the sky. As if the clouds had thinned slightly, as if the world beyond the mist had begun to exhale too. I moved one hand, just slightly, fingers shifting under the blanket. The texture was familiar, comforting, like waking in a place that remembers you, even if you've forgotten yourself. The house breathed with me again, a gentle creak above, the sound of old pipes settling, maybe the faint rustle of branches outside. Everything calm, everything known. There was no need to interpret anything, no need to name, only to allow. I didn't want to rise. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. But the idea of rising, the thought of feet meeting floor, of walking through soft rooms still holding night, didn't feel like leaving something behind. It felt like carrying something forward, because the quiet I had found was no longer a place, it was a part of me. Not tied to the chair or the window or the moment, but sewn into my breath, folded into the rhythm of being, like rain that had seeped into the soil, no longer falling, but never gone. And I knew. Whenever I left this seat, whenever I opened the door, whenever I stepped once more into the stretch of living, the stillness would come with me, not loud, not dominant, but faithful. Eventually, my body stirred, not out of need, not from discomfort, but the way a leaf might turn toward light. Naturally, slowly, without breaking the stillness it grew from. I shifted beneath the blanket, let one foot slide free, felt the air kiss my skin, cool but kind. The cushion beneath me remembered my shape, even as I began to rise. I didn't move quickly. There was no reason to. The house asked for nothing. The moment remained whole. But something within me, something quiet and calm, had begun to stretch. Not a leaving, just a change in posture, a readiness to carry the quiet somewhere else. I stood slowly. The blanket slipped from my shoulders and folded into itself at the edge of the seat. The room accepted the shift without surprise. It had been waiting, not impatient, but present, the way a friend waits without expectation. My bare feet touched the wooden floor. Cool, smooth. The grain of the boards met my soles, like a memory. The house made no sound, but I could feel it breathing, the way warmth lingers after a fire fades, the way light holds a room, even after the lamp is off. I walked toward the kitchen. Each step was quiet, not out of caution, but reverence. Not silence for silence's sake, but because it felt right. Because sound, here, was sacred. The teapot was still on the counter. I didn't reach for it. I only touched the handle, felt the coolness. Let the memory of warmth travel into my fingers. The mug sat beside it, empty now, but not hollow. It had been filled, held, sipped from in silence. That mattered. Outside the window, the light had changed again. A gentle brightness now. Still gray, still quiet, but carrying the shape of morning. No sun, no burst of gold, just the kind of pale, faithful glow that comes from the world turning slowly toward itself. I stood there for a while, hands resting lightly on the counter, eyes unfocused. I didn't think of where I had to go. I didn't think of what I had to do. The quiet had changed me, not in a way that asked for declarations, but in a way that made movement softer, breath deeper, thought slower. I knew that when I left the house. When I stepped into the damp, waiting world, the stillness would come with me. Not because I tried to hold on to it, but because I had let it inside, and it had made itself a home. The front door stood where it always had, unmoved, unchanged. Its wood darkened slightly by age, its handle smooth from years of touch. I reached for it slowly, not because I hesitated, but because I wanted to feel every part of the moment. The coolness of the metal, the texture of the wood grain beneath my fingers, the weight of the silence behind me, and the breath of the world waiting ahead. I opened the door. It didn't creak, didn't resist. It simply swung outward, welcoming, unafraid. The porch was damp, not wet, just kissed by the night's long rain. The air was still, the kind of stillness that comes after a story finishes, but the memory of it lingers in the room. Mist hung low across the clearing. The trees beyond stood quietly, their branches heavy with water, their trunks dark with patience. Bare feet on cool wood, the blanket still draped over my shoulders. My breath slow, like the final pages of a book. You don't want to end. The forest didn't speak. It didn't have to. Everything it had to say was already here. In the smell of moss, in the weight of fog, in the hush that wrapped the earth. Somewhere, a drop fell from a branch, hit the ground with a gentle sound. Not sharp, not startling, just a reminder. The rain had been here, and perhaps still was. The sky above was pale, gray, but lightening. Clouds shifted slowly, as if uncertain whether to part or stay. And I stood there, not as an observer, but as part of it. The same way a tree does not watch the rain, it receives it. The same way the earth holds water. Without question. The world did not ask me to go. It didn't tell me to stay. It simply existed and invited me to exist within it. Without plan, without effort. I sat on the steps, the wood cool beneath me, the air soft around me, the mist brushing against my ankles, like something old and kind. I looked toward the trees, not searching, just looking. The way one looks at fire or waves or someone they've known a long time. And I felt it again, that small, steady understanding, that I was not outside the quiet anymore. I was the quiet. I stayed on the porch for a long time. There was no need to measure how long. The sky didn't change much. The trees didn't speak. And the world didn't shift in any dramatic way. But everything around me felt quietly alive. Not with urgency, not with purpose, just presence. Each breath I took moved more softly now, each blink slower, each thought more like mist than meaning. There was no planning ahead, no remembering behind. Just sitting, just breathing, just being. The mist curled and lifted in low spirals. Sometimes it reached the edge of the porch, touched my bare feet, then drifted away again, as if it was shy, or curious, or both. I felt the wood beneath me grow warmer. Not from the sun. It hadn't come out. But from time. From stillness. From the simple truth that nothing in this place was in a hurry. Not even the boards underfoot. Not even me. Eventually, I stood. Not because the moment ended, but because it changed shape. That's how quiet works. It doesn't vanish. It flows. It becomes the next part of itself, without needing fanfare. I walked back inside. The air felt different now. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. The same rooms, the same walls, the same faint scent of tea and wood and time. But now they felt like something I had become a part of. Not just visited, not just passed through. Belonged to. I moved slowly through the rooms, ran my hand along the counter, paused by the chair near the window, let my fingers trace the folded blanket I had left behind. Not cleaning up, not packing, just saying thank you. Not in words, not even in thought, just in presence, in touch, in pause. The rain had stopped completely, but the hush remained. The kind of hush that only rain can teach. The kind that stays with you, even after the storm has moved on. I stepped once more into the front room. The cushion still held the shape of where I had sat. The lamp still glowed, dim but warm. And for one last moment, I stood there, still wrapped in quiet, still held by stillness. And I smiled, not wide, not bright, just enough. The door remained open behind me, not wide, just enough, as if the house itself knew that closing things completely isn't always necessary. Some spaces are meant to breathe, to stay slightly ajar, to allow what's inside to meet what's outside, without separation. I moved slowly through the room one last time, not to check anything, not to look for anything, just to feel the space around me as it settled again into quiet. Didn't feel like I was leaving. It felt like I was becoming a part of the silence this place had always held. The table still bore the mark where my mug had rested. A faint ring in the wood, not a stain, just evidence of warmth. I let my fingers brush across it, gently with a kind of reverence, normally reserved for names carved into old trees. The lamp in the corner flickered once more, and this time, it did not return. It faded slowly, softly, until the room was held only in natural light. That pale, silver glow that arrives just after a storm has passed. I stood there in the half-light. Let it surround me. Not like a spotlight, but like water. And in that moment, the house no longer felt like shelter. It felt like reflection, like everything I had felt in this space was simply my own quiet, spoken back to me in the language of wood and window and rain. I stepped toward the door, paused with my hand on the frame, not to say goodbye, just to remember how the grain of the wood felt, how the mist moved just beyond the porch, how every breath I took here had changed me without ever asking me to change. And then I stepped outside. The mist was lifting now, slowly, quietly. The forest beyond stood in calm formation, not watching, not waiting, just being. The air smelled of stone and root, and something green that hadn't yet opened. And I breathed it in, like a memory I hadn't lived yet, but knew by heart. The hush followed me, not like a sound, not like a presence, like a second skin, like something I would never need to carry because it had chosen to stay with me. I didn't walk away from the house. I walked with it, in every step, in every blink, in every breath that stayed slow and deep and sure. I didn't look back, not because I was trying to forget, but because there was nothing that needed seeing again. Everything that mattered had already come with me, in my breath, in the softened pace of my steps, in the silence that still clung gently to my shoulders. Like the mist. The path away from the house was narrow, but clear. No signs, no markings, just a trail of damp leaves, and the memory of rain rising faintly from the earth. Birdsong had returned, not loudly, just enough to remind the air that it could hold voices again. Even the sky had shifted, a softer gray now, streaked with pale light, and the trees, once hidden in fog, stood still and tall, like old friends who understood the value of walking beside someone without needing to speak. I didn't think about where the trail would lead. That was no longer the point. Movement didn't mean escape. It didn't mean return. It simply meant continuation. The quiet unfolding of presence into the next shape. A single branch reached out above me, dripping with the last of the storm. One drop fell onto my shoulder. Cool, sharp, real. I smiled, not because it startled me, but because it reminded me that I was still here, still walking, still part of this moment, still wrapped in the same hush that had begun by the window and now moved with me, like breath. The forest didn't grow louder, but it felt more awake, not hurried, not rushed, just aware, as if it too had been resting. And now, together, we were stretching into the world again. I walked for a long while, or maybe not long at all. There were no clocks, no time, only light, only breath, only the steady press of foot into soil. Eventually, the path opened, not into a road, not into a clearing, but into space, wide, unmeasured, peaceful. I paused there, not at a destination, just at a place where the stillness inside me matched the stillness outside. And I knew, without doubt, without explanation, that the quiet would remain, not as something I needed to hold on to, not as something fragile, but as something that had grown roots inside me. Rain may fall again. Storms may come. The world may grow loud once more. But I had heard the hush. I had learned its language. And it would find me again, anywhere I paused long enough to listen. So I stood there, not because I needed to stay, but because I could. Because there was no longer any difference between staying and moving. Because I was home. In the breath, in the pause, and in the silence, I would carry. Always. Later. Whether hours or days had passed, I couldn't say. I sat once more beneath a sky laced with pale clouds, listening. Not for something specific, not for the return of rain. Just listening. The world was quiet again. Not silent, but quiet. The kind that settles over you, like soft fabric, like sleep that doesn't demand to be deep, only kind. The memory of the house was still with me, not as images, not as detail, but as feeling. The warmth of the blanket, the weight of stillness, the rhythm of rain on glass that had since stopped, but still echoed inside me. When I closed my eyes, I had changed. Not in ways that anyone would notice, not in ways I could list, but something inside me had slowed, not stalled, slowed, steeped, softened, and I liked it that way. The forest beyond me was still. Birds moved occasionally, leaves shifted, but nothing hurried. The world had remembered its breath, and so had I. I sometimes wonder how long the house had waited for me, how many rains it had watched alone, how many quiet evenings it had offered, to no one in particular. And I wonder if I had passed it once, a long time ago, without noticing, without being ready to hear it. Some places don't call out, they don't shout, they don't signal, they just wait until you're finally slow enough to feel them. And then, when you do, they open. There were no signs, no fences, no destinations, just soft earth, cool air, and the kind of quiet that only lives inside you, once you've stopped trying to chase it. Sometimes I sit with my eyes closed and imagine the sound of rain on that window again, and it returns. Not perfectly, not precisely, but truly. Because what mattered was never the pattern of the drops or the angle of the light. It was what the sound made room for. The stillness, the space, the remembering. And I carry that with me. Everywhere. In crowded streets, in busy moments, in restless nights. The hush is there, not always loud, but always waiting. So if ever I forget, if the noise of the world grows too thick, if the breath becomes too shallow, I know how to return, not to a house, not to a forest, not even to rain, but to stillness, to the quiet that taught me how to let go, how to rest, how to stay. And even now, long after the window has cleared, long after the blanket has cooled, I hear the softest sound. A single drop falling somewhere far away on old wood. And I smile because I know I'm already there. The house had grown quiet again, but in a new way. It wasn't the stillness of sleep or the hush of falling rain. It was the kind of silence that follows a realization, like the world had said something profound, and now we were both waiting to see how it settled. I moved through the hallway slowly, not because I didn't know where I was going, but because I wanted to arrive everywhere, as if for the first time. The bedroom felt different now. The same walls, the same bed, the same soft light, filtering through the open window. But everything had shifted slightly. Or maybe I had. I ran my fingers along the blanket, folded neatly at the foot of the bed. It was heavier than I remembered, textured like woven sky. It didn't invite rest. It promised it. I opened the drawer of the nightstand. Inside, a smooth stone, a single pressed leaf, a folded note that read only, "You don't have to do anything. Just be here." I let the words stay inside the drawer. They already lived somewhere deeper now. The window was open just enough to let the breeze pass through. It didn't move the curtains. It didn't shift the air. It just reminded the room that outside still existed. And it was kind. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress gave slightly beneath me, the way people do when they're listening. And I listened too, to the soft creaks, to the memory of rain on glass, to my own breath, slow and steady now. Not because I was calm, but because I belonged. There was a book on the dresser, not the same one as before. This one had a cover worn smooth by time, no title, no markings, just the faint indentation of fingers. That had held it before. I opened it at random. No chapters, no names, just small thoughts, spread across the pages, like footprints in soft earth. Some places aren't meant to be remembered. They're meant to change you quietly. Sleep isn't where we lose ourselves. It's where we return. I closed the book and placed it back exactly where it had been. Not out of order, not because it was over, but because it had said enough. The room didn't grow darker, but it grew deeper, as if its corners stretched farther, as if the ceiling leaned in slightly, to listen better. I lay back on the bed, arms at my sides, feet relaxed, and I let the mattress hold me, not as weight, but as shape, as if the bed had been waiting, not for a person, but for a pause. Through the window, a breeze stirred just enough to shift a single strand of my hair, and in that motion, the whole room exhaled. Not a sound, just release. The bed didn't hold me, it accepted me. There's a difference. One implies weight, the other, welcome. I sank without falling. I rested without effort. And though my eyes were open, I didn't feel awake in the usual way. It was more like being between layers of stillness, Not sleep, not thought. Just being held by everything and nothing at once. The breeze through the window had grown cooler. It brushed across my arm with a gentleness that felt like a memory being remembered for me, a kindness not tied to time. Somewhere in the walls, a faint creak, the kind that old homes make, not because they're shifting, but because they're listening. I imagined the beams above me, settling deeper, as if they too had learned how to exhale. Outside, a single bird called. Once. Then silence again. It didn't sound alone, just brief, like a punctuation mark in an otherwise wordless poem. I turned my head on the pillow, letting my cheek rest fully against the fabric, the texture soft, cool, worn from use. It smelled faintly of cedar and wind, not scented, just honest. I let my eyes drift closed, not because I was tired, but because darkness felt more natural than light, not heavy, not deep, just present, like the inside of a cave you trust. Thoughts came and went, but they no longer shaped themselves into words. They were feelings now. Colors without names, shapes without edges. They moved through me, like the breeze moved through the room, without asking for permission, without needing to stay. I imagined the house around me, like a shell around something soft, not protective, just surrounding, letting me be quiet, without making me feel alone. My breath slowed further, each inhale a stretch, each exhale a surrender, and somewhere within that rhythm, I lost track of where I ended. And the room began. Not sleep, not quite, but something close, something gentler, something that doesn't pull you under, but invites you deeper, where nothing has to happen, and everything is allowed. There was no clock in the room, no ticking, no subtle hum, no glow in the dark, and that felt right, because time here wasn't something to keep, it was something to release. I drifted through long, slow breaths, each one carried gently by the hush that wrapped the space. Not deep sleep, not full wakefulness, something quieter, something steadier, as if the world had placed a hand on my chest and whispered, "You don't need to go anywhere. You're already where you were meant to be." The house said nothing, but I could feel it noticing me. Not watching, just being aware. The way trees know the wind is coming, before a single leaf stirs. Outside, the forest breathed too. I couldn't hear it anymore. Not clearly, but I sensed the presence of roots, holding ground, of branches slowly rising, with the return of light, of soil resting deeper after the long rain. Inside the room, shadows shifted across the ceiling, slow and dreamlike, not because anything had moved, but because light had changed its mind again. It no longer filled the room. It hovered, software, still, respectful. I turned slightly in the bed. The blanket moved with me, folding around my shoulder. Like water, the pillow welcomed the shape of my head, without resistance. And beneath me, the mattress didn't press. It received. I whispered something to the air, not words, just a breath. And the silence didn't answer back. It accepted, the way oceans accept what falls into them, without asking why. At the edge of awareness, I felt the world beyond the house stretch and stir. But it wasn't calling to me. It was simply continuing. And I didn't feel left behind, because the space I was in had no urgency, no expectation. Didn't need me to rise, to move, to act, only to be. Somewhere in the corner of the room, a soft sound. Wood releasing tension. A sigh, as if even the beams above me were resting. And I let go a little more, of thought, of shape, of anything that tried to define the moment. And what remained was warmth. Not from flame, not from body, but from presence. The warmth of stillness, finally becoming familiar. Eventually, I opened my eyes. Not because I was ready, but because my body remembered what light looked like through quiet. It was soft dash, not sunlight, not silver, just a pale glow that had waited patiently. At the edge of the room, I didn't move, not right away. I let the light settle on me, like dust might settle on a windowsill. Slowly, without pressure, without sound, I let it find me, the way the rain once had. Drop by drop, moment by moment. The pillow beneath me held its shape. The blanket had molded to me completely. It no longer felt like something over me. It felt like part of me. Through the window, a low cloud passed. Its underside brushed the tops of trees, leaving behind only suggestion. I watched it without focusing. It was there. It moved. And that was enough. The house around me had settled again. Not into silence, but into presence. I could feel it. The grain of the wood. The faint tension in the beams above. The way the floor held the weight of stillness. Like a memory it chose not to forget. I sat up slowly. My body moved without decision, as if it had remembered what slow motion felt like before I could instruct it. The blanket slid from my shoulders, but the warmth remained, as if the air had learned how to hold me on its own. Bare feet touched the floor, cool, smooth, alive. Wood like river stone, worn not by water, but by waiting. I stood, felt the balance shift, felt my weight return, and it felt good. Not heavy, just real. The window drew me in again. I stood before it, palms on the frame, watching the forest sway, in rhythms too slow to see, but too true to miss. No rain now, just damp branches, and quiet motion. Just breathe, turning into light. A bird passed across the window frame. Not hurried, not loud, just there. A reminder that life continued. Outside the hush, but never far from it. I reached for the mug on the nightstand. Still empty, still warm from the memory of holding it. I didn't refill it, didn't move toward the kitchen, just held it again. Because sometimes the shape of something matters more than what's inside. And this shape reminded me of quiet. I breathed in, not to wake, not to begin, just because breath felt beautiful. I stepped out of the bedroom, as if the house itself were dreaming me forward. No sound followed. No floorboard complained. The walls simply accepted my movement, as if they too had waited to see what shape I'd take next. The hallway was dim but not dark. Light filtered in from the main room, spilling across the floor in soft puddles, like moonlight melted into wood. I walked slowly, not cautiously, but thoughtfully. Every step felt remembered, not rehearsed, not planned, just known. The living space welcomed me back, with the same quiet it had never left. The fire was out, but the scent remained. Smoke and pine, warmth and memory. I breathed it in, like a familiar story, told without words. I passed the window, the same one where I'd watched the rain. It was still there, the glass cool. The forest beyond shrouded in a veil of soft, lifting mist. And yet it felt different. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I reached for the wool blanket, folded over the chair, draped it around my shoulders again, not out of need, but because it felt like ritual, like putting on a memory. The room was as I had left it. Books unmoved, mug on the table, candle long extinguished, but still carrying its shape in the air. Nothing had shifted, and yet everything had. Because now I walked through this space, not as a guest, but as someone who had been folded into the quiet and come out softer. I sat near the window again, not the chair this time, the floor. Crossed legs, hands resting on my knees, blanket around my shoulders, like a quiet echo of warmth. The air was still, so still, that I could hear my own breath before I realized I was listening. So still that I could feel the space around me, agreeing to exist, exactly as it was. I watched the mist roll low across the clearing. No urgency, no drama, just presence. It didn't rise or fall. It drifted, like thought, like memory, like everything that matters most, but demands the least. I let my eyes close again, not for sleep, just for stillness. And in that moment, the house breathed through me, not into me, not around me, through me. I wasn't the one remembering peace. Peace was remembering me. It felt like I had always been here. Not in this house, not on this floor, but in this moment. This exact rhythm of breath and stillness. The space no longer surrounded me. It moved with me, breathed with me. It had stopped being a place and started being a state. I leaned back against the wall, the wood cool and solid at my spine. The kind of comfort that doesn't coddle but reminds. You are here, it seemed to say, and you don't need to be anywhere else. The mist outside had thinned, not vanished, just drifted into a quieter presence, like someone walking farther down a path, but still within sight. I opened my eyes, just as a beam of pale light slipped through the clouds and touched the edge of the window frame, the way it landed on the rug. Long, low, quiet. Felt like punctuation. Not an end. Not a beginning. Just breathe. Somewhere in the house, a page turned. Not by hand. Not by wind. Just the shifting of air. And time. And story. And I imagined that book again. The one with no title. No chapters. Just thoughts. Reflections. Moments left behind like stones along a path. I wanted to add to it. Not a paragraph, not a poem, just a line. The kind of line that says everything by trying to say almost nothing at all. So I rose, slow and steady. Let the blanket fall to the floor behind me, a small heap of warmth I could always return to. My steps were nearly soundless, on the wooden floor, not from effort, but from presence. The small drawer by the table still held the notebook. Its leather cover was worn, its spine soft, its pages yellowed gently by breath and time. I opened to the next empty space and let the pencil rest against my fingers. I didn't rush. I let the moment arrive on its own. And then I wrote. Stillness doesn't wait for you. It welcomes you when you've slowed enough to be recognized. I read the words once, then closed the book. That was enough. Outside, a single breeze moved through the trees. Not like wind. Not insistent or wild. Just a reminder. Like something brushing past your shoulder. To let you know, you're not alone. I stood at the window for a long time. Not thinking, not remembering. Just existing. And that was the most peaceful thing I had ever done. I didn't return to the bed. I didn't need to. The rest I had found wasn't tied to a place or a position. It had folded itself into me, like breath, like heartbeat, like the gentle rhythm of mist against a window. The fire hadn't been relit, but the room remained warm. Not from flame, from familiarity. The warmth that lives. In knowing nothing more is required of you. In this moment. Except to be, I sat in the center of the room, cross-legged, back straight, hands open in my lap, not meditating, not waiting, just allowing. Letting the quiet arrive in waves, then pass through. letting the house speak in creaks and pauses, letting the light move across the floor, like water in no hurry to evaporate. In that stillness, I remembered moments, not from the world I'd come from, but from the space I'd become part of. A page turned in silence, a mug resting on a windowsill, rain falling onto moss, a breeze that didn't ask questions, none of them loud, none of them defining, but together, they formed something sacred, something whole. I rose once more, not to leave, not to stay, just to move with the quiet. As it shifted shape again, I walked to the door with bare feet and a stillness in my spine I hadn't felt in years. The house didn't resist me. It didn't cling. It trusted that whatever had passed between us had already taken root. Outside, the mist had lifted completely. The forest stood in perfect clarity. Not dramatic, not staged, just real. Tree trunks damp and dark, leaves curled from moisture, the earth rich with the scent of renewal. I stepped into that air and felt it meet my skin, like a familiar voice saying, "You're part of this now." There was a clearing just beyond the porch. I walked to it, sat on the soft grass, cool and slightly wet. Let my hands press into the soil. Let my eyes lift to the gray, bright sky. And I breathed, not to center myself, just because breath was what stillness had taught me to love again. No questions remained, no endings to narrate, no need to summarize. What had changed? The quiet didn't ask for reflection. It was the reflection. And so I sat, facing the forest, feeling the hush still humming in my chest. I didn't move for a long time, because nothing was calling me away. And when I did rise, when I stepped forward into whatever came next, it was without noise, without tension, just presence, like rain becoming mist, like silence becoming breath, like stillness becoming you.